What's between heaven and hell? If our world is the purgatory that most religious texts make it out to be, then what are we meant to do? Is it time to finally reckon with all our mistakes? Maybe even reflect back on what we could have done differently with our lives. What does purgatory look like? If it's similar to prison or death, then that seems doable. Because at least it wouldn't be in fucking Bruges. This is In Bruges.
I was like, there's got to be some type of, fucking Bruges reference.
Chris, can I tell you something?
What?
You're an inanimate fucking object!
You got to get all the lines out of our system.
That's my favorite line.
Look, picture a lollipop man doing no one fucking karate. We just got to get them all out of our system before we get into the deep conversation.
You know how much I love Ralph Fiennes.
Yeah.
So when he pops in this movie and that's what he says, it was like Captain America getting the hammer. I was like, fuck yeah, he's here.
Oh, yeah. I almost was going to correct you for a second. Like, Captain America doesn't get the hammer, but then you meant like when he gets the hammer later.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say like Captain America getting a shield or something like that.
No. I meant like getting the hammer in Endgame when people reacted that way. That was me when Ralph Fiennes banged the telephone.
Like, I thought for a second you were mixing up Thor and Captain America.
No, so what I was doing was in Endgame... We could go on for an hour.
Listeners are like, all right, I'm turning this shit off.
No, that's probably my favorite line of the movie.
Yeah. I mean, that's up there. I once had it as my Facebook status. When you can update your
Really?
status back in the day, I quoted it. And my dad got mad at me because it was like a curse word and I was a teenager at the time.
Chris, you can't put that. No, this is one of those movies that while I was watching it, I was like, why haven't I seen this like 15 times? Why don't I own this on Blu-ray? Because this is only my second time watching it in full.
Oh, I forget that. Actually, I don't think I knew that was only your second time.
Have you seen it a lot?
Yeah, I've probably seen it like 5 or 6 times now.
See, I knew that, and that's why I was like even more excited to do this movie. I knew you've seen it a lot, and you're not a huge rewatcher, so that's why I was like, okay, Chris must really like this movie. But yeah, while I was watching, I was like, why haven't I seen this? Why don't I watch this all the time? Because it was so enjoyable. It's so funny.
Yeah. Well, it has, which we'll get into it more later, but it has a very strong dynamic of like tonal whiplash. You know what I mean? Which is what I love. I think I love stuff like that shows like a broad range of like how dark and fucked up life can be, and then also how weird and funny it can get.
You know what movie I was thinking about a lot when it comes to that? While watching this movie, I was thinking about Pulp Fiction a lot.
It's funny. I was thinking the same thing. I feel like these movies are kind of like cousins to one another.
Because In Bruges might be the only one that kind of pulls off something similar to what Pulp Fiction did in terms of that tonal whiplash.
Mm-hmm.
Wait one second.
We're keeping this.
Oh, fuck, I lost it.
Listeners probably don't know what the hell that sound was, but Altaf was about to sneeze. There we go.
We got it, baby. Okay.
Can you add in like a little sound effect?
This is the first podcast we're doing after New Year's.
Yeah, this is our first podcast of the year of 2025.
Yeah.
So happy New Year, guys. We hope you guys are all doing well.
So we were thinking of a theme for this month of podcasts that we do. And you thought of redemption?
Like redemption and rebirth. Those two things. New beginning, second chances, rebirth, whatever. It's kind of a broad, all-encompassing energy that I was trying to capture.
And we went through Google movies that deals with these themes. In Bruges popped up. We both got excited. I like Martin McDonagh. I haven't seen Seven Psychopaths, but I've seen all his movies besides that. I've seen 3 Billboards, and I've seen Banshees of Inisherin. And I think, speaking on that tonal whiplash, especially with just his dialogue, I think what I like about him so much is that his dialogue plays like action sequences, especially if you see his movies in the theater. Now, I haven't seen In Bruges in the theater, but I've seen Banshees and 3 Billboards. And Banshees feels like kind of a cousin to In Bruges. Mm-hmm. Not just in the fact that it's Brendan Gleeson, Colin Farrell back again working with Martin McDonagh, but also tackles similar themes of purgatory and all that stuff. And I remember being in the theater for Banshees, and just certain characters would say things that are so jarring and unexpected, and a scene would take a turn in a way you don't expect, that it feels you're watching a John Wick movie, but it's just 2 Irishmen talking.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I love about his writing too, is that I'm always on edge and laughing. I don't know if I'm going to be crying or laughing the next scene, which is so exciting.
Yeah, he's very clearly a playwright. I've only seen
Yeah, you've seen one of his plays.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to get at. I've seen this movie and Seven Psychopaths only. I have like inverse of what you've seen, and Seven Psychopaths is very okay.
That's what I always
I
hear.
didn't care for it that much. I was young when I watched it. I haven't watched it since, but when I was young, I remember being pretty mid about it. But I have seen a play from when I was like 14, I think.
Do you remember the name of it?
Yes, it's called The Lieutenant of Inishmore, I believe is what it's called. Chris Pine was in it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that was kind of cool. I got to see that. And same type of energy. I didn't know until like a decade later that was Martin McDonagh. But I saw it and I really enjoyed it. It's similar dark comedy. People called it in reviews like Quentin Tarantino meets Monty Python.
That's like not a bad description of Martin McDonagh in general.
Yeah.
In his movies,
It's like where I think the play is like where a leader of like a local rebel group in Europe. I think he has like brothers or something like that living at home. And while he's out, his cat dies, and they don't know what to do because he's like this scary rebel guy who come back.
Yeah.
So it's them trying to figure out what to do, and it escalates to crazy shit. So it's a fun play. But its point is, though, he's had this very strong sense of humor in like fucked up situations.
I wish I saw one of his plays because I've always heard great things.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you can't like, they weren't like filmed like how some plays are later on. So I don't know if I'll ever get to see it. But
You want to do the intro real quick, by the way? I
yeah.
just realized.
Did I not do it?
No.
Okay. Whatever.
We're here now.
Welcome to Movies That Changed Us. I'm Altaf.
And I'm Chris.
And if you're listening to this on Spotify or wherever you listen to our podcast, know that you can also watch us at Movies That Changed Us.
And if anyone likes the show and wants to support it, we do have a Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/movies that changed us, where we do weekly commentary tracks.
Tell
of
them
us
what we're
watching
doing.
movies. And right now, we just got voted and approved to do Jurassic Park. So by the time this episode comes out, a commentary track to the first Jurassic Park movie should be out already. So that's really cool. Then we're going to do the sequels, and we're going to do all of the motherfucking sequels.
Yeah, Chris, so I was saying that we should just do the first three. Chris was like, listen, if we're doing Jurassic Park, let's do the Jurassic World.
Let's commit. We're showing up for Jurassic World. Fallen Kingdom is the second one, and then Dominion, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I like forgot what they're called.
No, you and listeners and viewers might be surprised which ones I really like. I mean, I obviously like the first one a lot. Like, I just
Yeah,
that's
the
a
first
given.
one's like one of the most important movies.
It's one of our favorite movies. We've also been like, we're never gonna do that. Like, we're gonna do that when we reach 100,000 subscribers. We've like
on the podcast.
Yeah.
And everything.
like on the podcast, it's gonna be a while before we cover that because that's such an important movie to us. But we're excited to watch it on our Patreon.
Yeah.
So go ahead and check that out. Okay, episode's a little rusty. I think we're having a good time, but I forgot to do the intro. It's been a while since we've recorded.
Yeah. We took a week off because of the holidays and all that.
So I'll just ask you right now, how did In Bruges change you?
Well, it's one of the first like true dark comedies I've ever seen. I first watched it when I was 13, I think, 12 or 13. I think 13. And it formed kind of a lot of I won't say like it directly formed, but it was like kind of it planted a seed of my sense of humor and kind of my worldview a little bit, because it has a strong dynamic of highs and lows is what I was going to say. It can be really funny and ridiculous and strange, and then also really dark and thoughtful and sincere. And so that movie does just mean a lot to me in regards to what movies can really do, because that's a lot of my favorite stuff. I love like BoJack Horseman that does similar stuff, stupid ass humor, and then it gets really dark at the same time.
Yeah, now that I think about it, that is kind of definitely your taste. You like a movie that can be very silly and very dark at the same time.
Because I feel like that's life. That's like real. You know what I mean? I feel like anything that like has a tunnel vision of any other types of feelings. To me, it's more insincere when like a movie is only dark and sad and brooding, which there's some great stuff out there for sure. I'm not saying all of it's bad, but sometimes you can feel that it's like almost insincere because it's like blocking out a sense of humor.
Well, that's why I mean, like one of our favorite horror movies is Hereditary. Mm-hmm. And the thing I always say about Hereditary is that there's a lot of darkly funny moments in that movie. A movie that is so serious and is so dark also has moments where Toni Collette, the way she delivers certain lines, makes me laugh.
Yeah.
But yeah, throwing that question back at me, how In Bruges changed me, I think like same thing. It was one of those early movies along with like Pulp Fiction where the cliche thing that a lot of people say, but it's very true. Like, I didn't know a movie could do this. I didn't know a movie could have a scene that could be really fucking funny and then also move you to nearly tears. And In Bruges has so many of those at the same time. And that tonal balance I'd kind of just never seen before. It was also like one of, if not my first introduction to Colin Farrell.
Okay.
Like, I don't think I had seen any Colin Farrell movie before then.
You know what mine was?
Punisher?
No, he wasn't in Punisher. He was in Daredevil.
But him as Punisher.
He wasn't Punisher.
What was he?
He was a bullseye on Daredevil.
I've never seen that movie.
Punisher got his own movie. He was played by Thomas Jane, and John Travolta was the villain of that movie.
What?
Yeah. John Travolta's the villain of the OG, like 2004 Punisher movie or something.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, I will say the video game for it was really good. Just to throw that out there. That was actually a great video
That's
game.
the most crisp thing to say. This early 2000s movie that was kind of trash. The video game I played a lot.
It was really good. And Thomas Jane voiced him still, and he has a great Punisher voice.
He does. I have actually heard it.
Yeah.
But...
Anyway, though.
So Colin Farrell as Bullseye?
Yeah.
That was your first introduction.
Yeah, he has like a big trench coat. He has like a scar or a tattoo or scar on his forehead that's like a target. And he's like really accurate when he throws things.
I've seen the way he looks in the sex tape. That's when he was preparing to shoot that.
Okay, all right, that's what
he was bald. Like, you remember that? He was filming it during that same time. So it's like we all knew what he was shooting. He was
We're more familiar with that era of Colin Farrell.
But yeah, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You know?
There's a scene in Daredevil where this old lady is talking his ear off on a plane, and his character's like evil, and he's like all tired of it. So he just kind of looks and has like a little bead in his hand, and kind of just kind of chucks it, and it bounces off the chair and straight down her throat, and she chokes on it and dies right next to him.
Oh.
And then the flight attendant walks by and is like, "Oh, is she asleep?" And he's like, "Yeah, she's asleep. Keep it down." Kind of thing. When really he just killed her.
Did you, when you saw him, did you like him in that movie? Were you like, this is cool?
I will say my sibling was obsessed with him already. She thought he was ugly in that movie, but it was after SWAT came out.
I was like, yeah. I was.
SWAT, I didn't see SWAT, and I still haven't seen it.
He is hot in
but
SWAT.
I do know that's like the thing everyone talks about. Colin Farrell is like hot as fuck. But with that being said, though, this movie was like my first like actual acting role I've seen him do. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. This was just I think it was my first introduction to him. So I just thought, for a while, I thought Colin Farrell had to be like a comedy star. I was like, he's so fucking funny. This guy who probably shows up in comedies or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's had the most interesting career ever, I think. But he is so fucking good in this. And Brendan Gleeson, my first introduction to him was Mad Eye Moody. And I think I remember my brain broke a little bit where later on, much after because I watched the movie for the first time around the same age as you. And later on in my life, when I learned that the actor who played Mad Eye Moody and what's his name, Ken in this, or Ray?
Yeah, Ken. Ray is Colin Farrell.
I always mix them up. But the actor who played Mad Eye Moody and the actor who played Ray are the same, Ken are the same person. It broke my brain because Ken is like, he's a killer, but he's so tender.
yeah. He's like kind of a teddy bear at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is like what's fascinating about that movie in general is that like using the backdrop of all of them being like killers and criminals, but still having their own code and their own moral complexities. And it's kind of, it's like tried and true noir kind of stuff. It makes everything feel more murky from a morality perspective. You know what I mean? And I think that's what, at least for me, the movie hits me differently each time I watch it because I have like a new opinion or a new angle to come at it from as I get older and wiser,
We'll explore it further. Is there like one thing that you found that you clocked during this time watching this movie that you hadn't processed when you first watched it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big question I was asking myself going into it, knowing we were going to podcast about it, was not so much because just not to jump around to the ending, but obviously, like, not only does Ray die, but does he deserve to live? Like, does he deserve another shot? That's kind of what I was asking myself going through again.
Movie's a lot about, whether everyone has the right to a second chance or not.
And what does it mean to like atone for a sin, or to make things right after you do something horrible?
I do like that the movie, because I kind of forgot that the movie gives away what he does really early on. Because I had only seen this once when I was like 13. For a while in my head, I always thought that's revealed after Act 2. But him killing the kid is you find that out very early on.
Probably like 10, 15 minutes in, right? Or
Yeah.
no, maybe like 20 minutes. I don't
Maybe
know.
a little bit more.
Yeah.
But a lot of the movie happens afterwards. And the reason this movie succeeds for me is that he killed a kid. I still feel sorry for him. I still have empathy for him. And that's where, like, the morality, like you said, gets murky for me, where I have to kind of remind myself. I'm like, oh, not just Ray, but also Ken's a killer.
Mm-hmm.
They're both, these are all criminals that have killed people. Yeah, Ray killed a kid. He still, even if he didn't kill a kid, he still killed people.
He was still going in to murder someone in cold blood.
And I think I like that this movie plays with you a little bit in that sense, is that, like, it makes you laugh, so it makes you easily forget that these are horrible people.
Yeah, well, it makes them more relatable too, because the fact that Ray clearly regrets it and it feels deep guilt and shame around what he did. That's the whole kind of crux of the movie, essentially. But like, yeah, like you said, there is something about it that's interesting, where like Ken's so loyal to him and believes in giving him a second chance, but at the same time, giving him a second chance would mean there's no justice for this little boy, you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of, but at the same time, I'm like, is that a better impact on the world?
But what I'm saying is that, like, yeah, cool, the kid's still dead. What does justice mean? You know what I mean? So that it's interesting that the movie poses so many of these questions, and no matter how many times you watch them, I mean, you've seen this movie so many times, you're still asking yourself that question.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's what was interesting about it when I watched it when I was like young too. You know, I was like 13-year-old me was like, oh, but yeah, he did something horrible, but I don't know if he should escape or not. You know?
There's also, that's why movie stars are important, because you need someone like Colin Farrell to do this kind of role. You can't just have any actor. You need a movie star that you kind of like.
Yeah. And then you need Ralph Fiennes to come and deliver.
Yeah. The fact that, like, this movie came out a year after A Goblet of Fire. So, like, Ralph Fiennes showed up as Voldemort, and he was, like, basically ballet dancing through that role. And then he shows up in here, and both performances are effective in their own way. I don't know. It excites me, because I've been doing a little Harry Potter rewatch, and I also watched Conclave this year. I've just been appreciating Ralph Fiennes so
And
much.
now he's going to be in 28 years later.
When he showed up in that trailer, I mean, come on.
I know, dude.
I rewatched that trailer just for him.
Just that little isolated clip of him moving through.
He's so buff. Like, he worked out probably so much just for that one part. I wonder, like, because I wonder if he's going to play like a villain type role. He looks like menacing.
He always looks menacing, though.
I don't know.
You know what I mean? And I'd be cool with it either way.
But there's also this, like, what I like about him, and I think he brings a little bit of it in Bruges. There's also he has some sort of warmth that he brings to his performances. Like, if you watch him in Conclave, there's a lot of sympathy and warmth coming from him. While also he's really good as playing characters that wear a huge burden on their shoulders. And I'm not talking about his obvious villainous performances like Schindler's List or like Voldemort or whatever. I'm talking about his other roles like Grand Budapest and Conclave and stuff like that. He can still play someone that is like not just like a demon.
Well, and that's what's interesting. Even in Bruges, he's kind of the same way. Obviously, he's a horrible person. He's an asshole. But he also is like, he's the only one that's trying to deliver justice for a little boy. And he has a family of his own. He has like a principle that he's trying to live by.
Totally. But it moves me when him and Ken have that standoff and you see him get emotional. You know what I mean? There's something more there than him just being a villain. You know?
Oh, exactly. He has like a real motivation that makes sense.
There's also like a level of insecurity in this character of Harry Waters that I love. That when, like, that scene where he calls him on the phone and you just hear Ray Fiennes' voice, but he's like, what does he not like about Bruges?
Oh, yeah. How is that not somebody's fucking thing with the swans and that?
Oh, a fairy tale fucking land is not somebody's fucking thing. The use of the F word in this movie.
Oh, yeah. I remember I had, we rented it when I watched it when I was young. It was on DVD.
Yeah.
Which I will just throw this out there. The old marketing of the movie is not great. Like, the cover of it is like super colorful. And you see the current cover where it's like him looking more serious in the dark colors. But if you see the original like DVD, it's much more like kind of...
They're trying to make it look like a fun Europe movie.
Yeah, and I get it. It's hard to market a movie like this because it's a very unique tone. There's like no other movie like it. But with that being said, there on the DVD, there was a some type of featurette where it's just every F-bomb the whole movie. And it just goes through it. And you almost can follow the plot because of how much they say it. But then at the very end, you just see that clip of Colin Farrell reading the letter and just being like, oh, he's got a mouth on him.
Well, yeah, then like when Ralph Fiennes shows up in the actual movie, like the meter probably goes off the roof.
Yeah.
I think like Wolf of Wall Street is the only other movie where I've heard like the F-bomb used so poetically in every other sentence.
I think doesn't Wolf of Wall Street hold like the record?
I think
for like narrative film that holds the most F-bombs. I think it's like 400 something times.
But Ralph Fiennes and his character, it just feels so right for him to keep using that word because he's so insecure and so bottled up that he just lets it out.
Oh yeah, like well, I mean, his first his soft introduction is the letter.
Yes.
And it's his voice reading over it. And yeah, same deal because like the poor lady, I forget the character's name, the owner, the pregnant woman, you know?
Marie.
Marie, yeah. How poor lady had to like write everything that he was saying.
He's like, by the way, I'm not the clerk.
Another receptionist. Yeah. I co-own the place with my husband.
I love her relationship with Ken too, Brendan Gleeson's character.
Yeah, well, yeah, and also like there is something interesting about her being pregnant too. There's constant usage of children throughout it.
Yeah,
you know, obviously with Harry having a family of his own and explaining to them that he's going to go to Bruges, he's going to go somewhere dangerous,
and Jimmy being a little person that gets shot at the end.
Yeah,
he thinks it's a kid.
Yeah, which we'll get to the kind of weird, ironic, poetic ending of Colin Farrell getting shot the exact same way he shot the priest too.
Yeah,
and his last words being the little boy. But I know I almost want to get to the ending now. I'm like, I feel it, but I'm like, we'll get to it.
But it's so, because it's just so interesting to talk about.
That's like the juice of the movie.
Okay.
Where the most flavor is, you know?
I want to ask you something though.
All right, what do you got?
How do you feel? Like, what are you like when you travel? Because I think aside from the themes of like purgatory and whether we can be forgiven, this movie's also a satire on tourism.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And
two types of people.
What are you like when you're traveling a new place?
I love it, but I usually am not the instigator or planner for it. Like, I also do value going somewhere and like chilling at the hotel and like using the computer peacefully and watching stupid shit on hotel TVs. I do value that time in a real way just as much as I do going and sightseeing.
So you love lounging out at the hotel sometimes?
Yeah, I do. I like both, but usually it's like other like family members or whoever I'm with. That's the one that's like, hey, do you want to go to this show or try this restaurant or whatever it is? I'm not the one that seeks out that adventure.
I'm definitely someone that is trying to like make the most out of the trip. Mm-hmm. I do like my time in the hotel room relaxing. I don't like just every second of my time on vacation being out. But I am definitely someone that's closer to Ken in this movie, where I'm trying to create an experience. But there's something so false about what Ken is doing that I relate to, which is Ken is trying to be like, let's look at the view. Look at this view. Let's go on that boat. Yeah. And it's like, Ken also doesn't really like Bruges, but he's just trying to make the best of it.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel that a lot when I travel, where I'm like, this is not really fun, but I should do this, right?
I'm like supposed to, yeah. Well, you like to go out more too, it just
in general.
Yeah, you are much more of like a going out guy than I am.
Yeah.
And like even like just because it's the new year, New Year's just passed for us, and I remember I texted you, not sure if you were working your day job or not, because you and I never made any explicit plans to do anything for New Year's, but I was going to do something really low key, and I was almost nervous because I was like, is he gonna expect me to like go out, or did he make plans with someone else, and I was gonna invite
you
me to
texted
come
me
with?
Without me proposing anything. You were just like, by the way.
yeah I was like, just letting you know, I know we didn't say anything, but I'm gonna be doing this, because I was trying to make that plan for myself, just to listen to myself, because I didn't want to like, I don't know, I'm not big on like going out to loud places, but you're much more into that than I am. Like, you and I celebrate in different ways.
Totally. Yeah, I think you definitely value like, I think you just value like a low-key isolated atmosphere. Mm-hmm. I remember talking to you about this, where I like going out, meeting people, and having like hopefully striking up a conversation with someone that I wouldn't usually. That's very exciting and thrilling to me. And I remember you talking to me, you're like, yeah, but there's a part of me that just feels like all of that is kind of fake. I remember you said that, and I'm like, I can't disagree there, because I do get excited in the moment that I'm like, look at me, just talking to a stranger. Wow. Because I wasn't like that when I was younger. So I feel like the 20s has been me compensating from when I was like a teenager who never really spoke with strangers. And so I think now I'm like going overboard. When you said that though, I was like, that is true. I never made meaningful connections with the people I met. But I also at the same time don't regret trying.
Well, that's the thing. I was like, there's nothing wrong with just being happy to see people and just going, you know what I mean? I don't want to just shame that part. I think to be more specific, I feel that way a lot of the times with like the nightlife scene more than like,
that's what I'm referring to.
because I like to hang out and make conversation with people like at a farmer's market or you know what I'm saying? Like I like that stuff. I do like to meet people and strangers. Like even there's a taco truck near where I live, and I went there a couple times, and I ended up asking the guy his name, and we like fist bumped, and now I go.
See,
you know what I'm saying? Like, I do like meeting people. It's not like I'm just like hermit, but
that's so funny. I'm like not like that in the daytime when farmers markets and places like that. I usually have like AirPods or on, and I'm like just trying to get my shit done.
yeah.
So we are like reversed.
That is funny. Yeah. We're yin and yangs.
But I do think the traveling stuff, the whole satire on tourism, is where a lot of the comedy comes in. I mean, right from the beginning scene with those like big fat people, like Americans wearing like a Yankees cap, wanting to go to the top of the tower. I mean, it's so harsh towards American culture.
I didn't catch until later that comes back. Do you remember?
Well,
when...
yeah, it's like, these Americans had heart attacks.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's
like, I didn't catch that until this go around. That's so funny. But I know. I remember when I watched it with my family too, how awkwardly hard we laughed when he calls them a bunch of elephants, and then he's like trying to run from them. It's like this awkward jog. It's so sad to see.
It really is, because then the guy gets tired. That's the thing, and his wife comes and comforts him.
It's so mean-spirited, that scene.
Okay, that's a great tangent for what I really want to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm curious on how you feel about this. Martin McDonagh in general is pretty good about this, in my opinion. But especially with this movie, he writes his characters in a very honest way. He's not afraid of making Ray someone that is despicable. Like the way he talks, the way he curses, the slurs that he uses, how he's racist at times. Like he's not afraid of writing Ray that way. And that scene's obviously paid for last, but there's a lot of scenes where you're like, Jesus, man.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel about that kind of stuff when characters are written in such a despicable way, but then the movie's also trying to make you like sympathize with them? Mm-hmm. Are you still able to connect with them emotionally? Yeah,
I mean, I think like I think it's necessary for the story to work for them to be that morally complex. You know what I mean? When you have, if he was like a goody two shoes dude who only had one mistake under his belt, but he's got obviously like he's got all sorts of shit going on, but he's like a human being. You know what I mean? And I think it makes it more, like, I guess, challenging for the audience.
Yeah, because Ray is someone who definitely lets his intrusive thoughts win.
Yeah, that's a good way to sum him up. He'll just suddenly just be like, a lot of midgets tend to kill themselves. And you're like, what the fuck did he just say?
Well, then he says that. He sets that up, and then he continues to bring it up.
Yeah, I know. And he just says it to his face later.
Yeah, you're like, he's not going to bring it up to Jimmy. And then he straight up starts talking to Jimmy, and Jimmy's like, what?
Yeah, it's so sad. Or whatever. And not sad, but like, it's his character is kind of sad in that way, you know? I think that's like the beating heart of the movie, though, is that it asks those types of questions about morality and redemption when these people are all objectively horrible people. So, morality might be out the window when it comes to heaven or hell for them. All of them are probably going to hell equally for different reasons.
I think this movie's also trying to like just ask a question of like whether or not any of us are truly just good people. And what does being good even mean? Because like even Jimmy, someone that at first you're kind of just like, man, Colin Farrell's like really saying crazy things about this little person, right?
Yeah.
But then Jimmy gets high on cocaine and starts talking about how every race that is not white is black, and that's going to be the Civil War in America. And you're like, Jesus. And then the next scene
he is like also hires prostitutes too, and
and then the next scene he's like, that was cocaine, man. And so I think it forces you to like ask yourself that question of just like, are any of us truly like this morally clean person? We all have dark sides. These people are killers, so maybe it's more extreme.
It's done to an extreme, but it makes the point very clear.
And I think that's why I like how honestly Martin McDonagh writes these characters, because I don't think he writes them with any sort of moral high ground. He doesn't try to protect himself by writing his characters as people with a good heart, even though they've done bad things. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like, it's very honest. Like the only reason Ken is the way he is not because inside he's really good, is because, no, it's simple. He likes Ray and he believes in Ray.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like you said, even Ray is still relatable in many ways.
Extremely.
And he's funny too. Like, making your character funny makes it easier to like bad people when you're writing.
That's a big key, yeah. But Ray is extremely relatable.
Yeah.
I mean, just him being in Bruges, it's funny how pissed off he is as being in Bruges, but the movie's obviously this big metaphor of feeling stuck in your life and not being able to get rid of the bad things that you've done and being afraid of, like, shit, is there any hope for me? These are very relatable things, no matter if you killed a person or not. Like, Yeah,
it's a very universal human feeling. I mean, I actually did have a question for you around that, and it might be kind of broad, but like, I interpreted Bruges as, I mean, it's obviously touched on it too, as like, obviously purgatory, but also it's like that feeling of not being punished for what you've done, not facing a horrible crime or whatever, but you're also not forgiving yourself and moving forward. And it's about that kind of in-between state of like, I did something horrible and I got away with it, or I'm getting away with it so far, but I can't forgive myself. So how am I supposed to heal from this? And like I already touched on earlier, like, is it fair to the little boy to just move forward and do something good with his life? And, I'm better now. You know what I'm saying? This kid got killed for nothing and he faced no consequences for it.
Yeah, you can even say that Ray feels worse being on that train when he thinks he's about to go away.
Yeah. But at the same time, though, like, if he does redeem himself, if he genuinely feels remorse and wants to go and have a good impact in the world, but we're taking that away because of something he's done before, that it's already essentially too late to undo. Is that a better impact?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is that like a better outcome of it? Or is it better to let him move on and to do something good?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the movie doesn't really have a distinct answer.
So what was your question?
My question was, I wrote it down. So have you been in that sort of space before?
Interesting. Have I been in the space where I'm not forgiving myself, feeling guilty, and not moving on? I mean, yeah, I think like I can't really think of like a specific moment.
But there's a feeling there that feels real.
But that feeling's super relatable.
Yeah.
I don't think there's like a specific time in my life where I felt like I was in Bruges, if we want to use that term.
Yeah. I know we should just use that as like a general cultural phrase.
Why hasn't that caught on? That should be something I'm like, man, 2020 felt like we were in Bruges.
We're in fucking Bruges. You have to say it like that, fucking Bruges.
Yeah, I think like career-wise, I think I'm still someone that thinks a lot in terms of like my career. Whether that's good or bad, I'm still in my 20s. I'm still a person that defines himself by what he does, And there are many moments where I feel like I should have gone this way. I should have been more honest here about what I'm doing. Or why didn't I learn from my mistakes here? Like, these are very broad things, but what's interesting about them is that these thoughts aren't like compartmentalized into one moment in my life. Like, I keep feeling that I pop back into Bruges every now and then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where every now and then, like occasionally, like last week I felt it. Like before New Year's, like a couple days before New Year's, I felt like I had that feeling of being stuck again. Where things are not moving forward. Every day's the same. That Groundhog Day in Bruges type feeling. It's all the same, where you just feel like nothing's moving forward. It's all the same. And like, I have to do certain things to get myself out of it because I've gone through it so often, where the main thing that I do now is that I kind of have to remind myself that I'm in fucking Los Angeles. You know what I mean? That's such a simple thing, but as someone who moved from across the country to like follow his dreams or whatever, I forget that I did that, and I live in a very beautiful city and
with a ton of opportunity and a ton of people to meet and a ton of places to take your life, essentially.
And forget career or anything. Just, I have a ton of friends. I have people, So that's the thing that I like gets me out of it. So I like pop back into Bruges every now and then.
So so you pop back into the feeling of like being, like in a limbo of not really moving forward through life, but not really dwelling or feeling bad either. You're kind of just like almost like a android or something like that.
Oh, dude, yes.
Yeah,
Like,
I go what you're saying.
yeah. It doesn't go away. It just like it doesn't go away permanently. It'll come back every now and then.
Sure.
I don't know if that's normal or not, but I have gotten better in fighting that feeling.
I'm sure it's normal. I mean, I haven't spoken to everyone on Earth, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty universal to like, especially when you get closer to your 30s, when you feel like you're kind of getting settled in who you think you are and where you're going to take things, it's probably super easy to get kind of locked into habits. Because at this point, you've been spent like almost 30 years of your life building your habits and finding out about yourself and, what you like and people, what you don't like,
Yeah, I'm getting closer to knowing who I am.
Yeah, and I've been kind of doing the opposite of what you've said, not in like a hostile way, like, oh, I'm I'm trying to avoid that, but like my emotional journey, I guess we can call it, has been more around separating myself from my career a little bit more and trying to find myself as like, okay, well, if you took away, let's say our YouTube channel got completely deleted, will I have something that's still enough for me, or will I, like, who am I without that?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get closer to that and understand that deeper.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely something I want to work on to get to where you're trying to get to, which is like not let what I do career-wise control my whole being. But sometimes it's just as simple as like I don't have the time to think about anything else but what I'm doing. And
well, our society's designed that way a lot of the times,
Yeah, it's tough, man. And so yeah, I can't help but be stuck sometimes.
Yeah.
So like I'll have those feelings. I'm like, God damn,
I'm fucking Bruges.
I'm in fucking Bruges. I can't get out. You know what I mean? Because it feels like I'm doing the same thing every day.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a good question. I think do you remember like a specific time in your life where you felt that very heavily?
Nothing specific. I'm kind of the same way. I get in and out of like, sometimes I feel like I'm trying to get out of certain habits and patterns about myself that I really don't like. And I think a lot of us are, right, as we get older. But once in a while, I can feel that part of myself coming back, and it feels so real in the moment.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, oh, I don't want to go out anywhere. I'm just going to coop up. I'm going to herm. I'm going to do this. I don't want to fucking talk to anyone. And then I like got to be like, oh, wait, no, this isn't you. This isn't you. Get out of here. Get out of here. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'm in that place. So I don't have any like specific, anecdote to go off of, but the feeling's there.
You and I both tackle a lot of dark stuff with humor in general, I feel like.
Yeah.
Even stuff that's happened to us, I feel like we will recall them in a funny way. At least I do that a lot. If you and I get into a fight, I'll bring up that fight in a funny way. And that's kind of my way to cope with it.
Yeah.
And I remember you've called me out on it a couple of times, but I think that's what kind of this movie's doing a little bit. It's showing that like you can still make jokes in a very dark time. The way like he goes on that date with the girl.
It's the girl from Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Right? It was Goblet of Fire, right?
Goblet of Fire. She's one of the floors or whatever. That. Yes.
That's how I remember that.
And then
ladies.
remember when Victor Crumb and them come out, they have like flames.
Oh, yeah. It's badass as hell.
Anyways, but he goes on the date with the girl, and this is right after you learn about what he did, how he accidentally shot that kid.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, so what do you do? He's like,
I shoot people for money.
She is like, just children and everything. Like he makes that joke.
Oh, yeah, well, she asks, like, who do you shoot? And he's like, priests, children, the usual.
And he, like, we just learned the darkest part, and it was such an emotional scene.
Yeah.
And now he's just making a joke out of it, and we're laughing.
Yeah.
And, like, that is life. And I'm not saying we kill priests and children, but, like...
That's life. Have you ever been there?
But do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's such a universal thing, and that's
not explored in movies. In movies, I feel like you either are going through trauma or you're going through the best moment of your life.
Yeah, and that's what makes Ray so fascinating as a character, too, because there is this underlying darkness. A lot of his humor is clearly to cover up his own pain and guilt. And even right off the bat, yeah, how he's just like, it's a shithole. You know that it's all there. If you watch it again, contextualize that why he's there. That all those jokes are clearly just to feel better about the situation. Like, even after he almost, takes his own life, and how he sees Brendan Gleeson had his own gun, And he's like, okay, give me the gun. And he's like, what? Oh, you tried to kill me and I don't get to kill myself? How's that fair?
I know. God, like that is such a dark scene where he's like sitting in front of a playground. He goes to shoot him, and this is what I mean by like every scene doesn't end the way you expect it to end.
Yeah.
He goes to shoot him, and then you suddenly see Ray pull up a gun, and you're like, whoa, and you're like, wow, that's fucking dark. And immediately afterwards, it's funny because they're bantering about like, I can't believe you were about to kill me.
Well, yeah, and it's like it's also highlighting this like funny compassion instinct we have. It's almost like the scene from It's a Wonderful Life when Jimmy Stewart's about to jump off the bridge, and then he sees Clarence jump in the water, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna save him now." You know what I'm saying? There's like this kind of instinct of like he's about to shoot Colin Farrell, and then when he sees Colin Farrell's about to take care of himself like that, he quickly stops. Like, wait, you're not supposed to do that.
Can we talk about the phone call scene?
Yeah, I'd love to.
It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
It is one of the best scenes. It's all like one big oneer too.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the prime examples of that tonal whiplash, where it starts off like you think it's going to be the regular, okay, boss is calling the hitman to get this kill done, right? We've seen this scene in a crime movie many times. And then it turns into like you getting to know a little bit more about who Harry is, about how we talked about. He's extremely insecure about the place Bruges that he recommended.
Yeah. Well, and also like he's really like hyper controlling. You know how he keeps making him go and check outside. He's like, is he going to the bathroom? He's having a wee or a poo. You know, like,
he's having a wee or a poo.
And then he's like, yeah, Brendan Gleeson's just rolling his eyes, like, all right, because Ray's not even in the hotel, but he's lied to him, and now he has to do more work to cover up the lie.
Yeah, he's like, he's trying to look for a bowling place. He's like, there's no bowling place in Bruges.
Yeah, I told him just.
But so and then it ends with him basically telling him he's got to go.
And almost like sending him to Bruges was meant to be an act of kindness, where he's like that, he sent him to like a fairy tale type of area, like, oh yeah, that'd be a great place to have your last moments.
Yeah, like what the fuck?
And then really,
Bruges?
like, and meanwhile, Ray like fucking hates it there.
Yeah. What do you make of Ken?
Ken's interesting to me, and especially this go around, watching it again, like his loyalty to Ray is very. It's interesting that it's like almost like a symbol of hope for him. He actually does enjoy things. I know, like you said, he might be fake putting on a front as people do when they're going on vacations.
Yeah.
But he does seem like a sincere guy. He seems like a nice guy who doesn't want to hurt people that don't deserve it, and he does see something good in his friend to the point where it costs him his life. He puts his life on the line for him. And so there's something really interesting there where, yeah, he's also a killer, but he does seem to have some sort of change of heart through Ray.
Yeah, I think it is in a way, and not necessarily in a bad way, but his kindness and hope for Ray is self-serving, where it feels like if he let Ray escape, that might save him.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That if there's hope for Ray, there might be hope for him.
How so?
I'm saying that's how Ken believes that. Ken believes that, like, okay, if a killer like Ray has the potential to become good.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, gotcha.
Then maybe Ken carries that guilt of, like, he says in the movie, he's like, and I know I'm a killer. I've killed people.
Yeah.
And when they're talking about being a good person or whatever, like, Ken's aware. He's self-aware. And I feel like there's a part of him that feels that if I put Ray on this train and fulfill his potential of being a good person, then maybe there's a chance for me.
Yeah, and he even says it to Harry though too, where he's like, he has the chance to change because he's young too. You know what I mean? He might also just see some level of like, I'm old, I'm pretty stuck here, but like maybe I can do something good through Ray by letting him go and change too, even if he doesn't end up changing.
What do you believe when it comes to that? Do you believe that there's a point in life where we're too far gone, or do you think there's always a potential for change?
I mean, it's so hard to say because I want to say, yeah, it's never too late.
But we're also young.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're not at a vantage point to look at things, right? But so it'd be naive of me to just be like, oh, it's easy to change. Anyone can. But I do think, it's never too late to try. That's what I think I'm going to carry that belief to my grave, and that our nature, we all deal with our own demons, our own shit, our own things, whether it's, from how we were raised or from, ways we were treated when we were young, all that stuff. We all have our instincts that that form for us. but I do think, we do have to put the effort in to battle them,
I think what's interesting, and maybe is it time you think we can get closer to the ending now? Yeah. So Ralph Fiennes arrives in Bruges. Like, there's this talk of like principle, right? Whereas like if I killed a kid, I would shoot myself on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is where the movie starts dealing with this idea of like, you gotta fucking die.
Mm-hmm.
You killed a kid, you gotta fucking die. And I'm putting it very simply, but like...
Well, he literally says, like, I'm sorry, you can't kill a kid and expect to get away with it.
But
you just can't.
And Colin Farrell's character says that earlier in the movie. He was like, maybe the only way for that feeling to go away, that he killed a kid, is for me to go away.
Yeah.
And I think even though Ken has that feeling of like, if I let Ray, and I'm putting this on the movie doesn't outwardly say this, even though Ken has that feeling of like, if I put Ray on this train, there's some hope for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Ray is pulled back. Now, literally, he's pulled back because he punched a Canadian in a restaurant.
Which is funny because it is a direct consequence of his own actions.
But if you're looking at the religious metaphor aspect of it, it's like the universe pulling him back to be like, nope, you got to face the consequences.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, exactly. You got to face the music. You don't get to ride away on a train and live a happy life after what you did.
What do you make of Harry Waters' character, especially when he appears in Bruges?
Well, I already touched on it earlier, kind of what I thought of him, that like, yeah, he's an asshole, but he also is the only one that's actually trying to, do, almost in a weird way, do right by this kid, because he's basically like, no, because it's not like he's just kicking him out and is saying, he has to go because he's a liability to our company. He doesn't say anything from a business standpoint. He just says everything from a purely moral standpoint.
Yeah, I like that this movie doesn't get too up its own ass about like, we work for a group of hitmen.
Yeah, the crime operation stuff. That's what I know. That's what's interesting. It's only concerned with just the morality, philosophical parts.
What do you want to tackle? Like, basically the point where Ken is on top of the tower.
Yeah. So you're talking about like leading up to it when they go, basically when Ken is like just ready to die for his friend.
Yeah, I like how. What's the meaning? So he drops the coins on the ground because in the beginning of the movie, he's trying to get rid of the change.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. That's funny.
The way I read that, at least like as an adult, is just kind of that feeling of you wanna leave with nothing in your pockets. You want to leave with nothing. Like there's that phrase of into the coffin with empty pockets.
Gotcha.
Like leave everything behind, put everything on the table. Everything's on the poker table.
Like all your possessions, essentially.
Everything's done for. You're going with this, like, because even that money that he has was made by killing people, right? Even if it was a small chunk of change, it was all made by doing
It's blood
sin.
money. Yeah.
It's blood money.
Yeah.
And so the way I interpret it is like he before he moves on to wherever he goes after death, he wants to let that go. So maybe he can go to a better place.
Yeah, and he goes the extra mile to like, when he's whispering, after he jumps, how he says to Colin Farrell, like, take my gun, Harry's here. He still gives all of his energy that he has left to his last breath to protect Colin Farrell. I took it from a more literal standpoint that he was just dropping change so passerbys can stay out of the way.
That's probably what it was.
But there's still an emotional thing that I was interested that you mentioned. He was trying to get rid of his change and the guy was tapping his forehead, or whatever.
Yeah, I just, because the movie had set it up earlier, that's why I thought there was some deeper meaning to it.
There might be. I'm just saying how I saw it was always like he was dropping coins so people walking by can like look up and stand back. So when he jumps, he won't actually hurt anyone.
Yeah, and then when like Colin Farrell runs towards Brendan Gleeson's on the ground, there's both their performances, man. It just feels like they've known each other for years and years.
Dude, their chemistry is so good the whole way through, even down to the end. When, like you said, when Brendan Gleeson's now just a pile of paste on the cobblestone floor.
Yeah.
You still feel their love for one another.
Like it's another like really, really funny but intense scene where they're in the hotel and Marie, bless her, is just like, no, I'm sitting right here and she's pregnant, so it adds that tension.
Yeah.
And she just says something to Ray Fiennes where she's like, how about you two just go home? And he's like, don't be ridiculous. This is a shootout.
Yeah, like, don't be stupid.
But it's like the funniest fucking thing, which feels very Monty Python, is Colin Farrell being like, okay, so how about this? I jump off the window, and I come around back, you come there, and then we can
You
have
can
a
come shoot at me there.
It's like, okay, you promise. So I'm not going to come out and you just ran away or something. It's like,
You're not going to be hiding in a fucking cupboard.
No, I won't be hiding in a fucking cupboard. You can find me. And it feels so Monty Python.
Yeah, that is a very Monty Python moment. So, yeah, and then when they're counting down to like, okay, 1, 2, 3, go.
Who's doing it? I'm not doing it. You're doing it.
I know. Then it gets so much more stressful, too, when you see the boat. So you think for a second, oh, shit, he has got a boat. And then he drops his gun immediately when he lands.
No. And then he gets shot, which I was just like, I remember the first time watching it, I was like, oh,
yeah.
Oh, he's dying. Like, I immediately was like, oh, he's going to die.
Yeah.
There's no way. Now let's get to like the meat and bones of this. Just to rush through it a little bit. We already talked about how Ray Fiennes accidentally shoots Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, like, it's echoing the scene of the priest and the child.
Yeah. Because they planted it earlier that Harry bought the bullets that had the hollow point rounds, I believe they were.
Yeah.
How they went through Colin Farrell and into his head and made his head just rip into a pile of meat.
Right.
And so even like when he goes through, it's like the film set, how it's like, remember how they said it's supposed to be like a nightmare sequence? Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be I forgot what it's an homage to, and I wish I had the time to look into what it actually was or what it meant.
It's a movie that both you and I haven't seen. But let me wait 1 second. It's Don't Look Now with Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland.
Okay. I wonder if thematically that movie holds relevance. It must, because there's a lot of references to like.
I read on the Wikipedia page that there's a lot of like references to that movie, and then the references become literal when she literally mentions the movie. The movie inside the movie's an homage. But yeah, so it feels very nightmarish, a little ethereal, and the final monologue, which is I think the thing that we both really want to talk about. I kind of wrote down two things that were basically like if he died or if he lives.
I don't really care whether or not he died. You know what I mean?
Here's the reason I mentioned two different options, which both lead to a very similar outcome, which is if he died, his final monologue suggests that Bruges in itself was hell. He faced his consequences in hell. He spent his time in hell, and he gets to move on. Wherever that is, we don't know, but he did his time in hell.
Got it. So it was like he was serving a prison sentence in Bruges.
And if he lived, then my optimistic reading on it, and this is my optimistic reading, it doesn't have to be everyone else's or yours, is if he lived at the end, perhaps he was punished enough with everything that went on in Bruges, and now he can still move on in a very literal sense.
Yeah.
My reading, whether he lived or died, is Ray achieved some sort of peace at the end.
Yeah, well, even his narration says, too, like, I really hoped I wouldn't die. Like, for the first time in the entire movie, he actually wanted to live.
Yeah.
And so there's something to be said there where it's like he actually, had a grasp, even though the whole movie he was moping and was suicidal and all these things. And then he actually had a reason. He wanted something to hold on to.
And he also adds that, like, whether this was, like, prison or death, whatever it is better than fucking Bruges.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And that's what hit me. And that's why I mentioned it earlier that like Bruges to me is that limbo feeling of not being punished for what you did, but also not forgiving yourself either.
Like I want this to either be over or me to be punished, but not in between. I can't deal with that.
Exactly.
And it's just so profound.
Yeah.
I find this movie so like, profound. I don't know any other word for it.
It's fascinating because like there are different ways to interpret a lot of it. There's a lot going on, right? You can look at it as a literal thing of he just has bad luck and he's stuck in this town that he doesn't like.
Yeah, and you can watch it as a simple crime comedy.
Exactly, and it's still a great movie on its own that way. But there's still a lot of stuff they throw in there, like even when how he gets immediate medical attention, which is like, maybe it's likely to happen because they're on a film set. Maybe there was a medical crew on set, who knows? But there's a lot of like implications that it might be fake. How he sees Marie immediately there too.
Yeah.
And then, you know what I'm saying? There's like stuff there where like, why the fuck would Marie be there unless it was in his head? Unless he felt like, the people that he affected were like watching him go, Yeah. You could interpret it that way too. But I think like whenever movies are intentionally ambiguous, I like to lean into the fact that it was ambiguous and just look into the overall feeling it gave me. More so because I don't like when people have those heavy debates of like, did so and so live or die, or like Inception, was it all a dream or was it not?
Yeah, it's fun to talk about it in a podcast.
Yeah.
Outside of a podcast setting, I think it is important to just accept the movie where it's at and to let yourself feel what you're feeling.
The thing that's interesting to me, though, I did want to touch on, just because I had a thought about this and I forgot to mention it, was like, if Ray did die, you know, do you think that would consider Ken's death meaningless?
If Ray died?
Because Ken really fought hard and sacrificed himself to pave a way for Ray to redeem himself and live again and have a second chance. It would essentially mean he died for nothing in a way.
Maybe, but let's look at it optimistically, because that's what I'm choosing to do for this reading of this movie. My optimistic reading of it is that even if Ray died, Ken doing that act means that hopefully he gets to move on to a better place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like these...
Like, at least he got to die for something, then live constantly and as
end
a
lives.
criminal and end worse. Yeah, exactly. Get worse and worse.
Right. Like, at least he got to, like, end this killing and maybe do something good right before he left.
Yeah.
You know? And with a pure heart. And not do it out of an order that he got.
There's a net positive, essentially.
I know there's probably a lot of people that read this movie in a very cynical way, and I'm not saying that's not wrong. That's a wrong reading, but I choose to look at this in a very optimistic point of view.
I mean, that's my favorite stuff, though, is when, like, you know, art can make you look at your own worldview, you know, and kind of bounce off of it, how you interpret it when it asks you a question as opposed to trying to answer it for you.
The best form of art, whether it be music or movies, are ones that help you learn a little bit more about yourself. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why we do this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't feel like this movie was trying to preach at us about a certain worldview. It was more just like, here's some really complicated characters and some goofy shit, some really dark shit. And like, what do you make of it? You know, like, what does it mean to you? Yeah.
It leaves things open for you, which is what I love about any movie. That doesn't try to give me answers or force feed me some message, but it leaves things open for me to like try to ask myself these questions.
Yeah.
That's why this podcast, I was like, when I finished the movie, the first thing I texted you was like, I'm so excited to talk about this movie, because I'm like, there is so much to talk about with this movie.
Yeah. I know there's a lot going on. Do you want to read the question we got?
Yeah, sure.
Or not question, sorry, the entry we got. What's the word for it?
Yeah. So we ask you guys, like we do with
submission.
Yeah. So we ask you guys, like we do with every episode, how this movie changed you. We got an email at moviesthatchangedus@gmail.com. You can find these prompt announcements on our Instagram at moviesthatchangedus, on all our social medias, basically.
All right, guys. This entry is from Max. I'll just say Max K, because I don't think I'm going to be able to pronounce your last name right. I apologize. He says, "Hey, nice dudes. Been loving the show." Thank you, Max.
Thanks, Max.
In Bruges holds a strangely significant place in my life. Very right time, right movie. In February and early March of 2020, I was traveling through Europe with my sister and had originally planned on ending our trip in Italy. As COVID loomed and travel restrictions became increasingly uncertain, we decided to reroute the journey and finish in Belgium instead. My sister and I had never been to Belgium and knew little about it, but In Bruges, this odd little film that we had randomly seen when it came out in our teenage years, was our main reference point. We rewatched the film together in our shitty little hostel bunk beds upon arriving in Belgium and fell right back in love with it. Inspired, we decided to spend my 29th birthday in Bruges before returning to the States. We didn't go in with any kind of plan or film-related itinerary. Instead, we just wandered the city, people watched in the central square, and took it all in. We quoted lines from the film to each other while walking along the river, called each other inanimate fucking objects, played poo sticks on various bridges, and joked about which one of us is more like Ken or Ray. We eventually decided we were a mix of both, with me being more Ken and her more Ray. It was our first time traveling together as adults, and we'd had a really tempestuous relationship growing up. I apologize. That was a big word, and I didn't know that word. Yeah. I feel dumb.
An hour into the podcast, Chris has trouble with big words.
This little adventure kind of cemented that we could have a great relationship as grown-ups, and it's only gotten better from Bruges. It turned out to be one of the best birthdays I've ever had, and in a weird way, it felt incredibly fitting. After all, Harry sends Ray to Bruges to have one last happy memory before he's done in. It ended up being our last happy memory together for nearly 2 years, as lockdowns began the day after we returned.
Wow.
I still heartily recommend Bruges and In Bruges to folks regularly. It really is like a fucking fairy tale or something. Max.
Wow. Oh my God. So that That's really cool.
Yeah.
Also very sweet that like you learned that you could have like a cool adult relationship with your sibling.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I can relate to that. I think my relationship with my siblings got a lot better as I got older.
Yeah. When you
So-
told me stories, it seems like you had a very typical teenage relationship with your siblings, and then
Yeah.
it grew into something more. But
Yeah, thank you, Max. That was an awesome email.
should we ask each other that question? Like, what are we?
What, Ken or Ray?
Yeah.
Overall, I think you're more of a Ray.
Mm.
Overall, I think I find you're
think
you're
so.
much more quick to mope. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. No.
I felt the regret in your voice when you said, like, "Yeah."
No, it's so true. Like I feel like my inclination is like I want to be like Ken really badly. Like I want to be the guy that can be like glass half full. Let's go read a book. Let's.
You do well. That's the thing. You do participate, like we said earlier. You do like to go out and you like to go and meet people and all this stuff. But I do think when things, it's hard for you to like go against a plan or to like kind of derail into something new territory.
I wear my heart on my sleeve. I like if. My emotions, I think with my emotions first, and I speak with my emotions first. I sometimes let my intrusive thoughts win. I do have that kind of inclination. I feel like you're like Ken in the sense of like you have this kind of like easygoing way about you, which is like day by day. Let's see how things go day by day. Like if something happens in the world that's fucking terrible, you'll be like, yeah, well, okay, let's see what's going on. I haven't read fully into it, but I'll figure it out. You know what I mean?
That's such a me thing. I haven't read fully into it.
Yeah, I'm usually like, I am like if I want to do the Ray voice, I'm like, it's fucking shit.
Yeah.
I'm saying it in a probably much more censored way than he would say it, but yeah, I get that.
There can be good in you wearing your heart on your sleeve. You do just go with things. You do feel the feelings. I instinctively like don't accept my emotions until I feel like it makes sense to.
Sure.
Which is ironic to say, but I very much am one to choose not to indulge my feelings until I have no choice.
I wonder who the Harry Waters in our life is going to be that calls us one day and be like, you got to kill him.
Our agents, our agents are going to be the one.
He's like, he's got to go.
Rocket money. How's that not someone's fucking thing?
Hey, can I ask you a question? Last question for you before we end the podcast. If you were Harry and you had to send me somewhere that, in your opinion, was a fucking fairy tale place before I had to die, where would you send me?
So I had to send you to your death. Where would I send you first?
Because Harry sends Ray to a place that he thinks is amazing.
Yeah.
So what place would you send me that for you would be?
I think is amazing.
Yeah.
Like where would I want to go? Essentially, is
Yeah,
kind of what the question
it would
is.
be like a very selfish thing, but you'd be like, this is where he goes before he dies.
Oh man, oh man, that's so hard to think about. Fuck. I did love Akumal, Mexico.
Okay.
That was pretty sick.
What about it did you like?
It was really tourist friendly, but it wasn't super mainstream touristy. And the food was really good. The people were really cool, and the beach was like right there. And there's just animals casually crittering along as you walk to and from bars. You'll just see iguanas just walk by your feet while you're sitting at a restaurant, and you're like, oh well, there's an iguana.
It would be funny if they made like a margaritas under the sun version of In Bruges, where where they're just like in board shorts having margaritas, but they're fucking miserable
That should be the franchise they make out of In Bruges.
in different places.
Yeah, in Cancun, like all these different exotic locations these two characters go to.
What a delight doing this episode with you, man. I'm glad we're recording again. This is going to be a fun month. Also a fun month on Patreon doing fun 2 months on Patreon doing Jurassic Park
Yeah.
movies.
If you're not on our Patreon, we do recommend it at this point because, we always recommend our Patreon, but like this one especially, we really want people to see because I think it's going to be really fun.
Yeah, if you miss reactions, I will say the commentaries are kind of like the next best thing.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much to our patrons for supporting us again and again. We really appreciate you. Last but not least, you're an inanimate fucking object.
Booyah!
Wow, you really always shock me with the booyah. Like, I never expected. I don't know how you do that.